Hey, welcome everybody.
Woohoo.
Um, so this is Junior Developer Happy Hour. We've been doing this meetup since about beginning of May, a little bit before then maybe, and it's AMA style. So I'm gonna post one more time in our chat here in Zoom, the link to the Slido. And Slido is a great place to post questions that you would like us to answer, because then they can get upvoted and we can just make sure to be answering the most questions that most people are excited to hear what we have to say about it. And then also in the chat, just a couple of messages up, you'll see that we have posted our Slack, the Slack group that we use to communicate. And so if there are like follow-up questions, or if there are other links that come up, other resources that we'd like to link to, that is probably going to be in the chat here in the Zoom. And for anyone who is new today, towards the end of the call, we will eventually stop recording, and then people can come off mute if they'd like, and we can introduce ourselves. You all can introduce yourselves a little bit more, and we can have more of a like conversation instead of just a couple of people talking. It's so bizarre that things are there. Just reposted that Slack channel. I think that's all.
Yep.
Yeah, cool, thank you. So then I can just give a really quick intro about myself, and then I'll pass it on. I'm Brady. I am a software engineer at Nordstrom Trunk Club. I've been working I got hired onto Trunk Club before they got absorbed into Nordstrom. I've been working there since 2017, since right after I graduated Dev Bootcamp. And I am full stack. I've been doing more full stack work recently. There was a good year or so when I was doing mostly front end. So our stack is React, TypeScript, other JavaScript stuff on the front end. We use GraphQL, and then also mixed in with REST APIs. And then Ruby is our backend Postgres database. Gosh, I was trying to take a quick little like 10-minute nap before this, and it totally threw me off. So now my brain is just totally foggy, and that's enough about me. Sam, go ahead, take it over, save me.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Before I do my intro, I just want to give a shout out to everybody. There's a lot of people starting the 100 days of code and JS30, so it's awesome to see everybody doing the challenges. But yeah, intro about myself for people that are new here. Just quick version of my intro is I'm a front-end developer at Lyft currently. I build internal tools for the mapping organization. Tech stack is React, Node.js, TypeScript. Those are the main technologies I work with. Yeah, I've been a developer doing it professionally for about 7 years. I originally graduated a long time ago during the dot-com bust with a CS degree. Gave up too quickly when I was looking for a job. Your first job is hard, no matter what background you come from, CS degree, bootcamp, self-taught, even any type of first job. I think it's hard, not just tech. Yeah, it's hard to convince people to give you your shot when you don't have any experience. But that's what this meetup is for, to give everyone tips from what worked for us, and then you can try out those tips that you learned. But yeah, let's get Zach going. He can give an intro for himself first, just to help people come up with questions, and then we can get started with the AMA.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Zach. I currently am the career coach at Rithm School, which is a coding bootcamp based in the Bay Area. I've been there for about a year and a half. And prior to that, I was a career coach on my own with private clients. And I was also lecturing at San Francisco State classes in industrial organizational psychology. So, how companies hire people, and then classes like motivation and stuff as well. And prior to that, I was actually hiring people, which is how I got into career coaching because I was doing a lot of hiring and friends and family were asking me when they were switching jobs for my help. And I just decided that I like working for the individual a lot better than a big company, and helping people change careers is really fun. And it's really nice to like watch people, go through the job search. That's pretty tough. And then come out the other side with a job offer and then touch base with them like a couple months later and they're super happy. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So at this point, we do have some questions, and I can go ahead and just jump into them and start moderating here. Of the questions who found jobs quickly after graduation, what were their most successful tactics, in your opinion?
Yeah, so that's a really common question that I always get. And I would say the tactics vary for everyone. For some people, cold applying works really well. For other people, it doesn't work at all. I always encourage people to network, but I'd say the people that are successful the fastest are people that develop a system and stick to the job search system every single day. Because on the job search, you put in a ton of work and you don't always see the results, even though things are happening in the background. It can be kind of discouraging to be putting in work every day and not seeing anything from it. But the people that just keep on doing it and develop a system, I would say, are the people that get the jobs the fastest.
What are some examples of systems that people
Yeah,
use?
so breaking it down into components, like, okay, I need to reach out to build my network, like maybe informational interviews or reaching out to people on LinkedIn or online hackathons, practicing coding, cold applying to jobs, using their existing network, talking to people, but basically saying like, I want to get this done on this day and get this much done during a week are usually the people that experience the most success.
Very nice. So it sounds like you've seen mixed reports of people. Like some people that we talk to, a lot of people we talk to really stress the networking, and other
Yeah.
people will say like you really have to make sure you're applying to a bunch of places, and you see that it's just what they do consistently that ends up paying off.
Yeah, I think there's some statistic out there like 80% of jobs are filled through networking or through referrals or things like that, and a lot of jobs aren't even posted. So I definitely am a huge fan of networking. If I were just graduating from a coding bootcamp, that would be my main strategy. And I think that results in better high quality jobs. But I also do have students that they just apply to jobs on Angel List and they get an interview and they end up getting the job. So I usually encourage people to do a little bit of everything and see what works for them. For some people, cold applying works great. Other people, they've never had a single interview from a cold application. So I think it just all depends on the past work experience and how appealing you look on paper or on your LinkedIn profile.
Great.
Yeah.
Do you have any resources or tutorials that you know of that could be helpful for junior devs, like trying to keep their fundamental knowledge? Do you know anything about tutorials for skills?
So one thing I probably forgot to mention in my intro is I actually don't know how to code myself. So usually for technical questions and actually keeping up to date on coding stuff, I usually defer to the technical instructors at Rhythm.
Do you ever think about going to Rhythm School as a student yourself? Because someone at Dev Bootcamp did that. They worked at Dev. Actually, more than one person did that.
Yeah.
They worked at Dev Bootcamp and later they went to the program as a student.
The thought has definitely crossed my mind. I've done free code camp and things like that. I have a hard time sticking with it every single day, but I'll get like waves of motivation. But um, I'm not sure that I will ever attend Rhythm, but I would say it's definitely a possibility. It seems like if I ever wanted to learn to code, now would be a great opportunity to use all these resources that I have.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now is probably when most people have the most extra time.
Yeah, definitely.
Here's the next question. I'm going to go ahead and kind of adapt things so that it is more from the perspective of you, like recommending things for devs. What job boards would you recommend aside from LinkedIn and Indeed?
So AngelList by far has been the most successful for our graduates. It's usually a lot of smaller companies, and the people that have found jobs through cold application, almost all of them came from AngelList. Some, of course, came from LinkedIn and Indeed. I have a link. There's a Twitter post of someone who posted a list of like the top 40 or 50 places to apply to developer jobs. I can post it at the end of this.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
Even our past guest, Stephen Inoue, he was saying that AngelList was worked the best for him too. He got like a bunch of interviews from there, and he applied. he did the cold apply approach. He applied to 60 places a day, like 60.
Wow.
But yeah, he said AngelList makes it easy because you can easily just keep like clicking the button to like apply.
Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of like the Indeed one-click apply, but there's like a little blurb you can put like, what do you want the hiring manager to know or something like that. So you can put a little extra. I usually recommend people don't use the one-click apply on Indeed and things like that, just because that works okay for people with traditional software experience in the past. If they have, 2 years of experience as a software engineer, then the one-click apply might work for them. But bootcamp grads are usually coming from non-traditional backgrounds, and they kind of have to put a little extra effort in and kind of reach out and tell them how their previous experience is relevant and why they should hire them. So the one-click apply, I find, makes people feel like they did a bunch of things in the day. Like, I applied to 20 jobs today, but then they don't hear back from any of them. So it's like, kind of like a false sense of accomplishment, in my opinion.
Here's another question, wondering how can you recommend that people make your resume and portfolio stand out especially when you're like just getting started?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is focusing on what skills from your past job are transferable to software engineering. And a lot of times it's things like soft skills. And a lot of people want to remove their work history that they don't think is relevant, or just pretend they never did it. But I've actually passed resumes to recruiters and things like that of students who took off everything that they deemed non-relevant. And the recruiter was saying like, oh, I see this person graduated from college in 2009, but then their work history starts in 2016. What were they doing that entire period of their life? And even though you might think it's not relevant, just condense it on your resume, make it a small space, but you should always have like the job and job title. And also, a lot of people think that a resume is like the bullet points under the job experience should be what I did the most of at work, when I would argue that it's actually what did you do at work that's relevant that you can apply to software engineering. And then obviously there's using the similar language to what's on the job posting. Recruiters are scanning your resume. They're not actually reading every word. They're not thinking about how your previous experience is relevant. You have to put it out in the same language that they use on the job posting.
Have you seen any ways that have surprised you, how someone has been able to tie in their previous experience, like besides maybe overlapping industries or something?
No, not too well. We had a student who was a high school teacher prior to doing the boot camp, and she was debating taking that off of her resume as well. And when they called her in for an interview, they actually said that they were looking for people who had coding experience and teaching experience, which was kind of just, seemingly random, but it makes sense. All of the guest speakers that are, including Sam, emphasize how important communication skills are for software engineering and things like that. So people who are used to talking to people and, getting in front of a room and having all of those presentation skills already established are pretty valuable.
I think I know who you're talking about too. And she got hired at, if it is the person I'm thinking about, she got hired at ed tech company. So definitely having that teacher experience on your resume would help especially if you're applying to an ed tech company.
Yeah, so that's another good point is if your previous experience is in the same kind of field, but not in software engineering, you're obviously going to lean on that a little bit more. And all things equal, if you have previous experience as an accountant and you're working and you're applying for like some type of accounting software, if you can code just as well as someone else, but you've already been in the industry for several years, companies will pick you over the person who has no experience.
Great. So this is from somebody that has more than 2 years of experience, and they're interested in doing full stack work, but they have really only specialized in React. And they're wondering, would it be better to focus on trying to go, just focus on front-end jobs, or start learning back-end tools on their own and then try to go for a full stack job that way?
So, I mean, I'm not sure. So the question is, should they apply for full stack roles now and self-teach or like learn themselves how to do things on the back end, or only stick to front end jobs and then hope to transition to a full stack within the company?
I'm also not 100% sure on this question either. If you knew somebody, I guess, who had specialized in React and they're thinking about like, how can I become full stack? What would you recommend for them to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think learning on your own is always going to be important, and demonstrating some level of competence. And maybe if they're looking for jobs, it would be easier to apply to a front end position, but make the expectation clear that you would like to move into a full stack role. And I think it's always easier to make a transition within a company than from company to company, just because people know your work ethic, they know your ability to solve problems and learn things. So if you're saying, hey, I can come in and work on the front end right now, but I'd like to be exposed to full stack work, is that something that would be a possibility? And just kind of setting those expectations from the beginning before accepting an offer.
That sounds like great advice. Do you have any, I think we were just talking about this and it was probably asked right before we were talking. Do you have advice about platforms you find more successful for new grads to apply? And you were saying AngelList, I think.
Yeah. But I will say the success on AngelList recently, post-COVID, has been a little bit lower, and almost all of the students who get interviews, it's some way, shape, or form through networking recently. I don't know if that's changing. I've heard people are saying they're seeing more jobs being posted and it's getting a little bit easier now, but most students, when I ask them like, oh, how'd you get that interview? It's almost always I was referred by someone, or I reached out to someone and they passed my resume on to the hiring manager. And it was almost always through a personal connection than just sending your job application into the void.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It seems like in general, things are just more competitive right now still.
Yeah.
Than like maybe a year ago. And
I think too that hiring managers and companies like they always like referrals because they trust the person referring them. But even more so now, when someone can't come in person and they can't really get as good of read on them via Zoom as they would in person. So having someone else kind of vouch for them, I think, goes even further than it did before. So
that's a great point.
Yeah.
What kind of soft skills and technical prep could you recommend before an interview?
Soft skill prep, kind of?
I think this is like, what sort of soft skills do you think you could maybe try to lean on? And then technical prep. This is saying like the two different things, I think.
Yeah, so technical prep, what I hear from a lot of students is whiteboarding and talking about coding rather than just coding is really hard for them. So I took this from another engineer. He said that he would practice leak code problems out loud, and he'd be like, oh, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm doing great. Oh, I see this problem here. You're asking me to do this, and then you're asking me to do this. And he would just literally talk to himself out loud as he was doing coding and kind of explain the problem while he was doing that. And he said his confidence in interviews afterwards was just way higher, and he struggled way less actually talking and coding at the same time. So I recommend that to everyone.
That's awesome. I never heard that before.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I do, like, it makes so much sense because it is just like the process of finding those words and saying them out loud. I think that's a skill that needs to get practiced.
Yeah, and like
Yeah.
just saying things in your head and pretending to say them out loud is totally different than actually saying the words out loud.
Yep.
You could even record yourself, I guess, with like Zoom or something.
Yeah,
Even like you can record your screen so you can record yourself doing it and talking out loud.
yeah, and then you
Record.
can go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No. Okay, so yeah, then you can see if you say things like or do any type of behavior that you would like to either increase or decrease.
That's basically what I was going to say. I've learned so much. I have been making, I've tried to make YouTube videos and these Zoom calls, and I personally know that I end a lot of my sentences with a tone going up. Like, I sound so not confident in what I was saying when I do that. So I'm trying to really change that, and I wouldn't have known unless I had recorded myself.
Yeah, and then we work on a lot the answer, tell me about yourself. It's one of the few interview questions they're going to ask you every single interview. It's the only question ahead of time they're going to ask you, and it kind of sets the tone for the entire interview, really. If you can answer that question really well and the person is interested, then they're looking through the lens of this person's interesting and a good fit here. Let's look for reasons why I can hire them. And if you don't answer that question well, then they kind of puts a bad taste in their mouth, and they might be less forgiving of mistakes that you make. It's just classic confirmation bias. Your brain kind of finds information to support what you're looking for.
Do you have any strategies? Like, how do you tell people to go about answering that question of tell me about yourself?
Yeah. The general strategy is, keep it under 2 minutes. Don't tell your whole life, only professional relevant things, what sets you apart from other candidates. And I also like to tell them to tie it into the job that they're applying for at the very end, kind of end and that's why this job is so interesting to me, and make it relevant to them. Another tip is don't write it out in paragraph form, or you will sound like a robot when you say it. Write bullet points that you can mix and match depending on the company that you're interviewing with, and practice with your friends, because you think something sounds really good, but you can kind of watch people's facial expressions on if it's resonating with them, if they like it. I forget where I heard this, but someone said you can do the eyebrow test. If someone's eyebrows go up, it's good, but if they kind of scrunch down, then they're confused. So test it on your friends, your family, and see what works well and what doesn't.
The eyebrow test.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you are going to try to go about cold networking, cold calling random engineers and recruiters on LinkedIn, do you have any advice and ways to go about doing that?
I do. Typically, so I'm assuming if you don't have much software experience in the past, recruiters are usually a little bit harder to work with, because a recruiter is given a criteria from a hiring manager. They're usually not engineers themselves, and they're not going to actually be working with you. So your email is just like another work email to them. They're not invested in it, besides whether they think that they can make a referral fee or close a position or fill the position and move on to the next one. So I recommend reaching out to fellow engineers, people that would be on your team, and try to make a personal connection with them. So if you went to a boot camp, the easiest place to start are the people that went to your own boot camp or other boot camps, and anything that you can find in common with the person. Try to establish some type of connection with them before anything else. That's the most important thing, is to make sure they know that you're emailing them, not that you're just spamming every person with software engineer on LinkedIn and seeing who responds to them. And students usually have a lot of resistance to that, and they think it's super weird. Why would I do this? This person's going to think it's really bizarre that I'm emailing them out of nowhere. But Brady and Sam, you can probably speak to this. How many messages like that do you get in an average month or week?
I have gotten more since starting this and posting more stuff, but I think A year ago, I would sometimes get maybe one a month or so. Maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure how much I get, but also it's just timing too. Sometimes sometimes I'm busy, so I asked them to try pinging me again like later in the month or something, just because timing's bad. Because some days I'm just not busy and somebody's like, can we chat? And I'm just like, yeah, I'm not doing nothing, let's just chat right now. um so it can be timing. So what I noticed though is like not many people follow up even if I tell them try pinging me again later. So I don't know if they ended up just getting a job and they didn't follow up, or they think I don't want to chat because I told them, even though I told them to try pinging me again later, because I'm not gonna follow up. I have like a bunch of these messages in my inbox. I don't have like the time to like go back and look through the messages and who I'm supposed to like, who like reached out to me. So my advice is follow up, especially if the person tells you to follow up. And also don't just say hi or how are you. I ignore all those messages. Sometimes I just block those people. Um, I'm just like, you don't slide into somebody's inbox and just say hi. I just think you're a bot, so I'll block you. Um,
Agreed.
especially if it's just like hi and that's it. Like you're not typing anything else. It just sits there for a whole day and it says hi. Sometimes I look at your profile like for 10 seconds and be like, looks like a bot, and I just like block it. Or the three that I really don't like is they just say hi, or they just say how are you, or they say can I ask you a question, and then that's it. Like if you have a question, just ask the question. You already asked the question by saying can I ask you a question. So that would be my advice.
Yeah.
I think somebody's trolling me now. I can see my LinkedIn messages going up. But
And
yeah.
I also know you were talking about how a lot of people are kind of resistant to reaching out to other engineers, like cold reach outs. And I've mentioned before, and it's just completely true. If people are wanting to like find a time to talk and have a virtual coffee, or like in normal times have a real coffee, I always get really excited because first of all, I know what my experience was like. It was like scary trying to get into this new role as an engineer. And second of all, this might be an opportunity for me to get a bonus referral. So it could be like a really rewarding coffee, like financially rewarding coffee. And then helping
Yeah.
you out.
Yeah, so I mean, and again, people have resistance to it, especially following up. But kind of like Sam said, following up does them a favor. They don't have to keep track of you or think about it. And I mean, don't follow up every day and use your judgment. But people like it when you follow up for them rather than putting the task on them. And yeah, referral bonuses, especially in the Bay Area, are worth taking the time to talk to someone for a little bit. And also one takeaway, which I think is cool, most people after they do start reaching out to strangers, their takeaway is usually, wow, strangers are way nicer than I thought they would be. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice realization, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so how much time would you say, like, is there a general rule of how much time a recent grad should put aside for just job searching type stuff, besides, like, if you can separate the, like, leveling up skills? Oh, wait, no, this is including everything. I'm sorry. Everything. I'm having a hard time reading and talking at the same time, including everything aside from applying, such as leveling up skills, etc.
So how much time should they spend improving their coding skills compared to applying?
Yeah, let's do that. That's a better way, maybe.
Well, I guess a lot of people have different answers to this, especially from the guest speakers I've noticed. Some people say you just, you need to focus on coding and get better, and the jobs will present themselves. Oftentimes I usually ask people, what is your primary goal? And a lot of times that will dictate the time allocation. So if your primary goal is to get a new job because you just graduated a boot camp, I would put more time into doing things that are going to lead to a job, because once you get a job, you're going to learn so much on the job that it's not like you're not going to learn how to code. But at the same time, it is a balance, because you have to be working on projects, doing things, going into an interview, doing whiteboarding, be able to talk about it. And it's always nice if you are able to excitedly talk about a project that you're working on just for fun and not because you had to do it. So I would say that balance is different for everyone, but I would say people are way more comfortable leaning into learning more things and coding than they are putting themselves out there, reaching out to strangers, applying to jobs and practicing that thing. So I usually have a tendency to encourage people to put a little bit more time in searching for the job, because naturally they just got out of a coding boot camp, they're super excited and they want to learn more. They don't have to force themselves to sit down and learn how to code, but they do have to force themselves to sit down and apply to jobs.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's cool that you've been able to see that pattern. I think, I wonder how I was. I think I was better at reaching out to people, but not much. So it's good that you've been able to work with so many people and see that pattern to know.
Yeah, and it definitely varies by the individual, but I would say as a whole, their comfort zone is learning how to code. They're leaving their comfort zone is talking to people, and especially strangers, and interviewing and all of that stuff. So.
I'm excited to get to this question, because you were talking about how you have spent time learning about motivation and stuff. So how would you suggest to stay motivated mentally and physically during the job search? Because like there is that time when you're working and applying and not hearing anything back. So
Yeah. So really kind of framing what success is important, I think. If you only view success as getting a job, you're just going to be disappointed until you get a job offer. So really focusing on, I'm going to reach out to 20 people this week. I'm going to apply to 20 jobs. I'm going to do 10 leak code problems, and achieving what you set out to do is motivating in and of itself, is actually meeting your goals that you set for yourself. And I think motivation is tricky. It's really complicated. It comes and goes for a million different reasons. And relying on motivation alone, I think, is a really bad idea. That's why I encourage people to make systems. And, it's Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. So that's when I apply to jobs, rather than Tuesday rolls around and what should I be spending my time on? And do I feel like doing this? Do I want to do like this? It just takes all those normal resistance out, and then it's just Tuesday at 9 a.m. I apply to jobs. There's no question about it. And then again, once you meet the goals you set for yourself, and knowing that the process is more important than the outcome, because you don't have any control. You don't have much control over the outcome.
Yeah, it's same thing for even like exercising and stuff. I go for a bike ride every day. After I'm working, I do push-ups every day when I wake up. So it works not just for your job search.
Yeah.
Setting that schedule is, it sounds like it's like making the routine that, just like you were saying, if you have to think about, do I want to do this, at some point you're going to not want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, the results of getting a job are delayed. I mean, or like the gratification is so far removed, where it's like, if I want to sleep in or browse Reddit, the gratification is instant. And the gratification of getting a job and applying to jobs, it's not rewarding at first. It's a long time away. So it's tempting to just do whatever you feel like doing in the moment, but oftentimes that is not the most important thing that you could be doing.
Okay. What would you say are the most important things to talk about in a cover letter?
Cover letters are tricky. I think Most people don't read them, but they are important to write because the people that do read them, in my opinion, are the hiring managers after you've kind of passed everything. And then they're like looking at a smaller stack of applications, and I think they'll read them. I usually recommend people find 3 good reasons why they are a good fit for the job. And basically a brief intro, interested in applying to this job. I'd be a good fit for the following 3 reasons. Put them in bullet point, not too long, not one sentence, but just kind of say, I have experience, working in a large code base, and then maybe link to a project that you worked on, and just keep it short and sweet. But basically 3 reasons, the top 3 reasons why you think they should hire you in a concise format, and just then thank them for the time at the end of it.
Okay. Would you say that's similar advice for, I think you were saying on AngelList, you can write a little blurb?
Yeah, so that's just basically a mini cover letter, or when it says send your application materials to jobs@companyname.com, the cover letter is just the body of the email. And I do think it's important to write cover letters because you should always know the top 3 reasons that someone should hire you for a job anyways. And I think just filling out everything, even the optional fields and the optional information, just kind of shows your attention to detail and just, going the extra mile and not doing the bare minimum. It's showing like, this company is a company I really want to work at. It's not just that you have the word software engineer in your job title and I'm looking for a job and I'm going to take anything that I can get, but being intentional about it.
Okay, so it sounds like this person has some sort of temporary contract or an internship with an end date, but there is a possibility of that becoming extended and getting a permanent position. Do you have suggestions on ways to earn that permanent role?
I would ask the manager and just be really straightforward about it and say, hey, I've enjoyed my time working here. What can I do between now and the time that my contract ends to ensure that it gets extended, and let them tell you what they think is most important. But I think doing that with enough time, same thing for asking for raises and everything, waiting until the decision has to be made, it's already too late. So giving someone notice, like, hey, this is something I want to keep on doing. What can I do between now and then? And then they'll tell you, and then you do those things. It's a lot harder for them to say, sorry, your contract's over. It's, but they might say, we're just waiting on the budget, so it's nothing you can do. It might just be a budget issue, but at least you'll know if it's something that something tangible that you can do, and then you can bring that to show them at the end of your contract.
Cool. Can you think of a minimum time between, like, what if they haven't started yet? Should they have that conversation the first week, or is that too early?
Did I make this up, or was it a 6-month contract?
I don't think it said.
Okay.
But it did say internship. So a lot of internships are about, 3 to 6 months maybe.
I would give it some time so you can legitimately know if you want to keep working there. So not the first day, but maybe you don't want the contract extended, but you want to be paid while you look for another job while you're doing that. So I would wait until you have a good idea of what working there is like, and then you can honestly say, like, I want to keep working here. What can I do to make sure that happens?
Do you have any other networking resources that you can recommend, like to practice interviews? I don't know. Are you familiar with Lunch Club? I have tried that before.
I love Lunch Club.
Okay.
I think that is the best place to get comfortable talking to people just for the sake of talking to them. And they want to be there because they signed up for Lunch Club too. So for those of you who don't know, Lunch Club is just a platform where you fill out a little bio about yourself. You say who you're interested in meeting with, and then you give some times and days that you're available, and it matches you with someone who they think would be like a good match for you. And then you have a 45-minute conversation, and you just talk about anything you want. Sometimes it's just, nothing comes of it. And other times they'll say, oh, let me introduce you to my friend. I know you're looking to do this. Like, let me introduce you to this person. Or sometimes things can come from it. But at the very least, you'll get comfortable just interacting with people. And I think especially now where it's easy to stay at home and not interact with anyone that you're not used to interacting with, it's a nice way to interact with strangers and keep your social skills up.
So it's not really directly related to interviewing or tech or anything. It's just
No.
talking to people. That's very cool. Huh.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's lunchclub.ai. Pramp everyone uses, practice interviews. That's the main one that I see. Every once in a while, companies will post that they're doing like mock interviews and things like that, and they'll post it on LinkedIn and things like that, so people do that.
All right. Okay. Do you have any advice for people who've applied and then haven't heard back from the job that they've applied to? Should they follow up or I guess move on or?
Yeah, so I think following up is good. Sometimes I'll even end the cover letter or suggest people in the cover letter, like I'll follow up within a week if I haven't heard anything. And I think it's that's nice to do for a couple of reasons, because a lot of times once you've applied, you feel like you have no control over the job, and knowing that you're going to follow up in a week gives you like a peace of mind, and you know that they're going to expect you to follow up. I've never heard of anyone being, yelled at for following up on a job interview, expressing interest. So the only time I think it's rude or weird is if they say, we'll get back to you in a couple weeks, and you follow up before the timeline has passed. But other than that, I think following up is key. A lot, like they might have just forgotten about your application, or you might have skipped over for some reason.
I have worked in multiple companies, and I think just about every single place that I've worked at, I have worked with a person who wanted so badly to work at the place wherever I was working that they were very persistent and followed up a lot, even after, in some cases, being told like, no, this fit isn't good for you right now. They've just continued to follow up. And then they eventually work there because people realize they're passionate about it.
Yeah, I think anything you can do to separate yourself from everyone else. And we've even had students, and I mean, be careful how you use this technique, who they have, failed an interview and they've said, hey, I really don't think that was representative of my coding skills. I messed up under the pressure. Is there any way I can get another interview? And most of the time it doesn't work, but we have had cases where students have moved and they say, okay, yeah, that's fine. And they are rewarded for their persistence. And the worst that's going to happen is they're going to say no.
I did that before with Uber. I interviewed at Uber a long time ago, and the question was easy. It was just to reverse a string, like without using like built-in like functions. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, I messed it up. I was having like an off by one error when I was doing it, and I just froze. So I didn't do well, and I emailed the person that interviewed me, and I built a whole web app that just reverses the string. And I made it look nice, and they brought me on site after that when I had totally bombed the interview. Or actually, they gave me another technical phone interview, so it was like a second try, and I eventually went on site, but I ended up bombing the on site when I went. But still, I made it further than I would have if I never did that.
Okay, so I know we had talked a little bit about bootcamp grads and recruiters might not be the best option. Have you heard of any success ever with a bootcamp grad getting hired through a recruiter like that?
Yeah, like an agency and like an agency recruiter. Yeah, I have heard of success like that. In general, it is usually people with a decent amount of work history, just because it's just easier for them to make the case on why the company should interview the person.
Okay, so say you find yourself at like a dinner party or something with somebody who just went to a boot camp and you could only give them one top tip. Do you have like one go-to?
I mean, I guess I would say the job search is not something that you need to do on your own. It is a communal process and involve other people to help you find work too. And don't just think that it's just you applying to jobs in your room behind the screen all day long, and rather engage your community and your network and let people know what you're looking for and have other people be looking for things for you too.
Yeah, use other people's time
Yeah,
in that
exactly.
way. When I was going to my coding boot camp, my mom, she's apparently like my PR lady or something. She would just talk to everybody about what I was doing. And I had a list of like 8 people who I could potentially have talked to after I graduated. Unfortunately, imposter syndrome prevented me from actually reaching out to them. But it was like it could have been a really huge help. I just needed to figure out that imposter syndrome part.
Yeah, and we usually suggest that people kind of post on their LinkedIn and Facebook, like just an update, like, hey, I just graduated from a coding boot camp. I'm looking for a job, and if you know anyone in the industry, if you could connect me with them, I'd greatly appreciate it. And people always say like, well, I already know if my friends know people, and they don't. And one person was saying, there's no possible way I'm going to get a single lead from this. I went to a small high school. I know everyone from there. I know everyone. And then they found out their mom's friend or something like that knew someone at like a company, and they got like an interview through that. And all the people that you used to work with or used to go to school with that you haven't seen in years are usually the best contacts, because they have a relationship with you, they already trust you, and then they've been going out and meeting all these new people and doing all these different things. So now their network's different. If you ask your best friends, it's like, well, we know the same people. There's nothing new here. So those aren't usually helpful people to network with, because they already know what you're doing and know the same people. But the people who you haven't really talked with, but had a relationship with in the past, are usually some of the best people you can network with. And it's a lot easier than strangers for most people. So.
Yeah, and people never realize like the social graph. Just you don't know the friends of friends, so just ask. Just put the question out there. Does anybody know I'm looking to work at this kind of company? It might be the person you least expect to like gives you the referral.
Yeah, we've seen that a lot. And a lot of people get hung up, well, that person works at a really nice company, so I'm going to save their referral until I'm better, until I can code better. I don't want to embarrass them. It's as long as you're honest with the person referring you, this is where I'm at, these are my skills, and you show up on time, you're respectful, you don't, ghost the recruiter or anything like that. That is what, people care about. And they if you bomb the technical challenge, it's not like you're going to stain their reputation if you were honest with them and saying, I just graduated from coding boot camp, but I'd love to work there. So don't be scared to just interview somewhere.
Well, we just got a whole bunch of new questions.
Ooh, okay. Here we go. Okay, so what are some red flags that you want to watch out for when you're applying for companies? Like red flags about that company not being a good place to work?
I would say that's pretty personal to the individual, but I would say if something doesn't feel right in the interview process, probably trust yourself that it isn't, because people are putting their best foot forward when they're interviewing you, just like you're putting your best foot forward when they're interviewing you. So if something doesn't sit right with you or feels uncomfortable, it's probably only going to get worse as you work there. Some things that some people think are red flags that are not, in my opinion, are taking longer than they said to get back to you. It always takes companies longer to hire than they thought, or not doing things exactly when they say they are is not necessarily a red flag. And sometimes you can have a recruiter who could maybe not be someone who you'd like to work with, but don't leave a good job because of a bad recruiter. Like I've had someone who almost walked away from an offer because the recruiter wasn't giving them answers to their questions about the company, but then they were able to get in contact with someone at the company, and it was, they answered all their questions and they started working there and they loved it. And they just had like a really bad connection with the recruiter, which they almost walked away from a job they're really happy at because they thought the recruiter was representative of the company. So be careful about that. So.
That's a great point because that is your first impression of the company. However, you probably have almost zero contact with that person once you're at the company.
Yeah.
Okay, so we were talking about being persistent and following up. Do you have a way to describe how persistent are you allowed to be in the application process?
Yeah. So I usually tell people there's a fine line between being persistent and annoying. However, you're probably going to annoy someone in your job search, and you should just accept that because it's not that annoying to get an email from someone that you just ignore or delete. It wastes like, a couple seconds of your day, but use your judgment and always give people a way out of things. And if you're friendly and polite and you're saying, hey, I know you have a million things going on, just checking on the status of the application, I would really appreciate an update whenever you get a chance. It's all about your tone, in my opinion, rather than like how many times you can follow up. It's be friendly, be nice, and don't make demands, and then people are usually happy to talk to you.
Great.
Yeah, I think following up a couple times is fine too. Just even me, like I'm an inbox zero kind of person, so sometimes I miss emails because the way I check email is I scan all the subject lines and I just click mark all as read, and sometimes I miss emails in there. So sometimes it's like when recruiters like reach out to me, um sometimes I don't respond till like the third time because recruiters will follow up. They're not ashamed to follow up. They'll just, did you see my last email, like just following up. I mean, they're nice about it. So sometimes it takes like 3 times till I see the email just because of the way I check email. So
Sometimes I'll check my email when I'm half asleep at like 5 o'clock in the morning when I'm just trying to roll out of bed. Not right now. There's like not a gym to go to during Corona, but I'll legitimately forget that I have read emails and then not see things until the follow-up.
yeah, I think that happens to me too. I think sometimes I actually read it and then I get distracted by something else and then I close the tab by accident. And then I forgot about the email.
Yeah, that happens to everyone, especially on LinkedIn. I think too. People think like, oh, they read my message and they ignored it, so they don't want to talk to me. And they probably thought, oh, I'll
Yeah,
respond to this later, and then forgot.
LinkedIn
yeah.
especially, because I don't think there's a way to mark, is there a way to mark things as unread? Like things fly by so quickly in my little message feed.
Yeah, me too.
Oh man. Okay, so how about, do you have any thoughts of the future of the industry, worker supply and demand, how jobs might move, or anything else about the future of the industry?
I mean, I have some thoughts, yeah. So I will say, out of all of the graduates from Rhythm, when COVID hit, I think only a handful of them lost their jobs, which was nice. And it was people that worked in like live events and like companies that were obviously just not going to make it, and their companies went out of business. So I do think that it seems like a pretty insulated industry to what's going on in the world, and that the demand is still there. I'm sure there are more people trying to become software engineers right now, but it still seems like tons of companies need software engineers, and I haven't seen that slowing down at all. Maybe Sam and Brady can speak to that more than I can, but it seems like people just keep needing software engineers more and more.
Yeah, I haven't like looked at numbers or anything recently. I remember there were maybe a month or two, maybe at least 2 months back. Um, is it maybe Microsoft had done analytics and they were showing the demand of software engineers currently versus the demand of software engineers in like 5 or 10 years. It's gonna like triple. Like we already know that it's in demand, but it's just gonna skyrocket still. And Sam called that at the beginning of this. Like everyone's working from home right now. It's just going to increase the demand for online presence.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm super bullish on the demand for developers to just keep going up into the right.
Okay. Have you seen any trends in companies hiring more outside of California or engineer jobs becoming fully remote?
So I think I'm just guessing at this point because who knows what the future holds, but a lot of companies have said, we're going to be fully remote until like summer of next year, or things like that. But um, I do think everyone who is saying like, oh, well, everyone's just going to work from home now and companies will embrace remote work. I think that's true to a point, but I think they're still going to want you to come into the office sometimes and build the relationships with people face to face. And I think the reason that companies were able to be so productive at first when everyone went remote was because all of the relationships had already been established at the company and people already had trust between their coworkers and they know everyone, they're familiar, they've been onboarded with the company, and then it was just like they were working remote compared to companies onboarding people. I do think there will be an increase in remote work, and we've seen that with students. There was only one student who got a job offer in San Francisco, and she said she was moving to another state, and they said, unfortunately, we won't offer this as a fully remote position. But I think that's definitely the minority. Everyone else, it's been, log on to Slack or whatever in the time zone that we're located in, and you can be wherever you want. So I don't know. That'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I'm curious as well. Okay. So yeah, this person sometimes gets emails from recruiters. They'll send jobs that they do not remotely qualify for. And this person is not alone. I know it happens to a lot of people. Do you think that they should go ahead and apply?
I do. I do think recruiters do this thing where they search resume or LinkedIn profiles for keywords. They say, hey, you'd be a perfect fit. Would you be interested in learning more? And then they wait to see who responds that they're interested in, or who responds that they're interested. And then they actually look at your profile and your resume for like the first time. And so that's why a lot of times they'll say, are you interested in this role? You'll say, yes, I am. And then they'll read your message, they'll look at your profile, and you'll never hear from them. So unfortunately, I think that's just like a tactic that they use to see who's interested, and then they look at who's qualified after they identify who's interested. So, I mean, if a recruiter sends you a link to apply to a position, you might as well. You don't really lose much from applying.
Okay. This, I feel like, is a leading question. If you did an informational interview with a fellow developer from a company that you applied for, but it's been weeks and you hear nothing, what should you do? I feel like we've talked a little bit about following up already.
Yeah. If the question is whether or not you should bring it up, I would say, yeah, I think, I mean, but again, you don't want it to seem like you're trying to be like, oh, I want to hear more about your career. By the way, I applied to your company, and like, can you make sure that application gets read? But being honest and being like, yeah, I applied, is there anything I could do at this point? Is that moving forward? Should I just wait, or what do you think would be the best way forward? But I would also feel out the informational interview and see if you have a connection with the person, or if it's kind of awkward, then maybe just, I don't know, not mention it. A lot of times people will ask you though, like, did you apply to that position that was open, or are you interested in working here? And a lot of times they'll take the lead, and if they're interested in passing your resume to someone, they'll kind of say it. Like, you're doing informational interviews on LinkedIn, usually people are doing that when they're looking for a job. It's kind of obvious that you're looking for a job, and if they want to help you, then a lot of times they'll offer it.
Okay. This person sometimes feels like they're just a person they're interviewing to pad their hiring statistics, but they always reject me. And then I ask, is this common? I'm going to assume that they're asking, like, is that something that companies do to like pad the hiring statistics?
I don't have access to information on how many companies do that, but I have heard that companies do that to meet legal requirements every once in a while. It's horrible that they do that, but I would hope that is the minority of companies, not the majority. So I don't know, because I don't think companies really want to reveal that information to people if they're doing that.
Okay. Ooh, and I feel like this will be tough to answer as well. How many interviewees do you think make it to the final round on site?
I don't know. I guess it would depend on how many positions there are. If it, assuming like one position, probably. I'm making this up because it would vary from company to company, but I don't know. Do you have any information at your companies? How many people make it to onsite?
I think the
Um,
percentage is small. Not in
yeah.
my company specifically, but like I see people talk about it. Like some people on Twitter like post numbers like the funnel, like
Mhm.
how many people applied, how many people made it past the first interview, how many
Yeah.
people made it past the onsite. And I think the funnel gets pretty small.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say they want a couple of options because not only just if people don't perform well, but sometimes people are offered positions and then don't accept them. So
Mhm.
they don't want to have to start the hiring process over. So they want enough people that it's
Mhm.
safe that they're going to get one person to say yes, but not so many people that it's a waste of their time to be doing on-sites all day.
Yeah, I think most companies probably have some kind of rubric, and like so, I don't know if they shoot for a percentage how many people to make it to the final round. I think as long as people meet the rubric, they can make it to the final round. I'm not 100% sure, but that's what I would assume.
Thinking back for the positions that I've been part of in the hiring process, we had like true entry level tech positions, and we would have to close the opening once we would get like maybe 200 applications because we just couldn't. We knew that there would be many good fits within just those applications. And then I don't know how many people would get calls, but I would say each position, there were fewer than 10 people that came on site. Maybe even closer to like 6 people that we would actually talk to in person for the position. But I think that's probably very possibly different no matter which company you end up talking to.
That sounds reasonable though,
Mhm.
because it's expensive for the company to do the all day interview. I mean,
Mhm.
these engineers are taking time out of their day and they get paid a lot of money. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah.
Okay, I had another one on last week's that I was excited to hear.
There- There's one more question that popped up too.
Ooh, here we go. Okay. Um, okay, so this person has on and off web developer experience in the past, but still feels like they're at a junior level. Um, and I guess the question is like, what level should they be applying for? Should they keep applying to junior roles? Excuse me, and then be transparent.
That's tough because Brady, you mentioned imposter syndrome earlier, and a lot of people undersell themselves and feel safer applying to junior positions when they're really not juniors anymore. Um, I would apply to junior and then just regular software engineer positions and kind of see what happens when you go into a regular software engineer interview. And if it's not even close, or if it was, you feel like, oh, I didn't get that job, but I feel like that was the level that I am. If you had a couple years on and off, I would just go for regular software engineer rather than junior. And then if you're not getting any results, maybe scale it back to junior and see what happens. Because they might think it's weird too that if you have a couple years of experience and you're applying to junior positions, they might think like, oh, that's interesting, and be like, I wonder why they're doing that.
Okay. Do you like this question was from last week and it was asking at what point did you start setting up interviews? Was it during boot camp? So this was directed specifically to the boot camp students or the boot camp graduates. I'm wondering, do you ever recommend that people start applying places before they finish their boot camp?
So people ask me that all the time. I usually say I don't recommend it, but if you want to, I'm never going to tell someone not to apply to a job. Like, I don't think I would be doing my job well if I said don't apply. There's so much going on in the boot camp that I think unless it's in the final week or two, that you're probably not using your time as productive as you could because there's so many other things to learn. I usually suggest that people start having conversations with people rather than applying to jobs at the end of their boot camp, because it's a nice break from studying. You're talking to someone and learning more about, how you're going to apply to jobs, what type of jobs you're going to apply for, what jobs would be a good fit for you. But just applying to jobs on top of learning everything is probably a lot to handle.
I would agree with that too. There's like so much you got to learn in the boot camp. I would rather just focus on the material and make the best use of time while you're at the boot camp, just learning stuff.
I remember, so the way that Dev Bootcamp was set up when I went through, we had to submit a revised resume before we graduated because they wanted us to commit to getting the resume done within a timely manner after graduation. And that was like the best way that they could control that we were actually going to do it was to threaten that we can't graduate. And I was like, I don't know when I'm going to have the time to work on just getting my resume complete, let alone start applying for other jobs.
Yeah, so the way we structure it, which I like a lot, is the final week of the program is all outcomes based, and it's I teach the classes and we have exercises, and we kind of use it as a time to make it slightly less structured. So a lot of students struggle with going from your days are structured all day long to then you have all the time in the world to apply to jobs. So our final week is we talk about strategies on the job search. We apply as a group to some jobs and we get the ball rolling and everyone's resume is finished. And then we see, okay, is there any part of the application process where you don't feel comfortable, or are you hitting any roadblocks? And then we address it in the final week. And it's kind of, so technically they apply during the boot camp, but it's the final week, which is all about finding a job. So it kind of, by the time the first Monday out of the boot camp rolls around, they've already built a little bit of job search momentum and they know what they need to do and they know if they'll, get hung up anywhere.
I like that. It's a nice way to kind of transition into that new mode.
There's a follow-up question in the chat.
Is this the one about the internship, or do you want to read it?
Yeah. It says, would you say the same thing to someone at an internship right after boot camp?
Should they be applying to other jobs during their internship?
Yeah, I think so.
That depends whether or not the internship is leading to a full-time position, but I would think I would start applying to jobs when you're during your internship, maybe not when it begins, but towards the end, because if it's coming to an end, you don't want to wait until you're unemployed to start the job search, in my opinion, even though it's hard to work 40 hours a week and then apply to jobs in the night and evening. So you probably scale back how much you did it. But I think building that momentum is important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's different from being in the boot camp because first of all, depending what boot camp you go to, you spend a lot of money. So that's why I said you should make the most use of your time being there since you paid for it. Internship is different because you're not paying to do the internship. So I would still be applying to jobs unless they're going to hire you full time. But yeah, I would pay attention not to burn out though. So you got to just learn what your limit is when you need to take a break. If you need to take Sundays off, then take Sundays off. You don't want to burn out. That's a bad place to be.
Speaking of that burnout, Zach, in like the psychology part of things and like related to motivation, is that anything that you have experienced? Like, can you draw up any tips of how to deal with burnout?
Yeah, I mean, definitely don't. That's why I'm so big on making the schedule, is you actually schedule in breaks too, and time off, and time to close your computer screen and go outside and leave the house. I think like a highly scheduled shorter workday is more effective than like, you get out of bed and you're on your computer and you have a million tabs open and you're kind of applying to jobs, but you're kind of doing other things. And then like you're kind of working all day. You're not working all day, you're not resting all day, but you're just kind of stuck in this limbo where you're not taking a break, but you're not really working. So you're not getting the benefits of either of them really. So just kind of like carving out time. I'm going to put all my effort into applying to jobs and learning how to code now. And then once this time rolls around, it's time to disconnect, and you know, you will definitely get burned out. I talk to a lot of students who get burned out, and they're applying to jobs and things on the weekends and at night and staying up super late. And it's, I mean, while I can admire their work ethic to a point, it's like, this is probably not healthy, and this is probably counterproductive. Once you get to an interview, you're going to be exhausted and have nothing to talk about.
Here's a new question. This person was offered a contract teaching position from the boot camp that they went to. Should they be afraid of delaying the engineering job hunt and the market being saturated with job seekers?
I mean, I have two thoughts on that. I guess it would be, how long is the teaching contract available for? Because I could see the risk of not just going into a full-time engineering role because it is October already. And well, another point is, I'm not sure what's going to happen to hiring over the holidays, because everyone seems to be working a little bit more and by their computer, and all hiring's remote anyway. So I don't know if we're going to have as much of a slump as normal, but now is a great time to be getting a job before traditionally the end of the year hiring slows down and then it picks back up in January. So you could view it as, it might be nice to carry you on over until January, because teaching is a great way to learn and sharpen your skills. But I mean, I guess it's a personal choice at the end of the day, whether or not you think the risk of teaching and missing out on the job is a bigger risk, or if you want to take the sure thing and wait until you have a little bit more experience in January.
Yeah. I actually did some teaching. I was a teaching assistant at General Assembly for their front-end course, and it wasn't a super long commitment, so it was like 3 months or something. So I did it just for income, but I didn't stop coding while I was doing that. So I was still volunteering, teaching other people how to code and stuff like that. Just my income was partially through General Assembly. I also worked part-time at their bootcamp as a mentor, so that's kind of a teacher too. I mean, I wasn't teaching classes, but I was like pair programming with students and teaching people stuff, just not like a curriculum. And I felt it helped me understand the material a lot better while I had to like teach it to other people. But yeah, you just want to be careful that if you do that, you have enough capacity to keep working on your development skills too. Because the thing about teaching is, especially if you teach at a boot camp, every new cohort, you're going to go back over the same material. So like you're just learning that beginning material really well, but then you're not advancing to like the more advanced topics that you'll need like on the job. So yeah, just pay attention to that.
Yeah, and I think we've also mentioned in previous weeks, it kind of also depends on your personal situation and like the runway that you have. Because if you're at a point where you really need a job, you have a job being offered to you that is related and like could help you focus at least on the fundamentals that you started learning. If you could put some sort of time limit of like, I will only have this job for X amount of months, or I will make sure to spend X amount of time per week making sure I'm moving forward in what I want to do, that could be a way to make that balance.
Yeah. And I've had friends who became teachers at their boot camp and stuff, and they did it for a while. And even after their boot camp went out of business, they were able to transition back into being a developer. So.
Okay, so this person, it sounds like, has applied for a position and they haven't heard anything back. And especially considering we've talked about like being persistent, would you suggest reapplying if the position has not been filled?
I think I would follow up on your existing application rather than reapplying unless a new job has actually been posted. Because sometimes, you know, like a very similar sounding job will be posted and it's actually slightly different. So, but if it's the same job posting, I don't know if I would apply for the second time.
Yeah, I would just follow up.
Yeah, it sounds like what I would say too. And then, okay, so that is the end of those questions. I'm curious to hear a little bit more, like what sort of material do you go into before the students graduate? What sort of prep do they get guidance on?
Yeah, so we do, I know Sam talks about this a lot too, like a lot of like, you know, growth mindset and imposter syndrome, like, you know, what is the proper mindset to go into the job search, and everyone feels imposter syndrome, especially when they're looking for their first job. So kind of some tips to deal with that. We also go over just, you know, interviewing process. Like, again, we practice like, tell me about yourself. So we'll go around in a circle and, you know, we'll get tips. We'll make everyone tell us about themselves and then get feedback from their classmates. We'll do mock interviews. We also do a whole thing on time management. So, you know, how to actually make that system. What does that system look like? What are the components of the system, and things like that. And then we also go over like negotiation and how to negotiate for a job offer, because a lot of students don't like to negotiate because they think they're lucky to get their first software engineering job. So like they don't want to seem greedy, and we tell them that it's not the case. You always have to negotiate, even if it's not about salary, but you probably should negotiate your salary too. So we just go over that. And then we have guest speakers, which is how I met Sam, come in and just kind of tell their story and give their tips.
Cool. Do you have students create a portfolio? Is that part of the curriculum or anything, or?
So yeah, they have a personal site which they work with technical instructors to make, and they put their portfolio in there.
Do you ever end up giving any, like having ideas of what makes a cool portfolio for somebody, or is that something the technical people talk to them about?
The technical instructors talk more about that, but I usually think just everyone has the same like boot camp projects on their resume, and I think just having something unique and something that they again built out of their own intrinsic motivation, just because they thought it was cool and wanted to build it, rather than it was an assignment, I think is always something that stands out in interviews.
So yeah, we can stop recording at this point, and people are encouraged and welcomed to introduce themselves. So here we go. I'll let you know when it's been stopped.